150th year of the church. And of course, this year for that. I didn't know. At the time, we were in pastor transition and pastor search, and we didn't have formal plans, and then I had accumulated over a number of years of a variety of boxes of stuff, and it kind of hit my head of, geez, that would be a great motivation to go through those things if I volunteered to do a Devil's Gate. They didn't have the Devil's Gate schedule, so I said I'll do one. But and then at the time too, I was kind of hoping to work with Corlew Anderson on it, and that obviously didn't wind up happening. But that was the whole thing. So this is not condoned by the church. This is not by the church. This is not for the church. This is me, just playing and being creative, which is a fun thing for me, to go through this history and share this stuff with you. So just so you know, this isn't going to be theology or any of that stuff. You can come to church on Sunday. 10 o'clock, we're done.
Somebody we don't like be playing, just a few more other people too. So.
And then I guess the other thing is, in some of all that stuff, and kind of back to Corlew, but also, many of you know that Mary Lou Rutherford was a really great friend of mine. And both of them, they were this church in a lot of ways. And I'm just so grateful to the two of them for letting me be curious and for letting me ask all kinds of questions and for them dragging me all over the place. Because honestly, if it hadn't been for Mary Lou, I probably wouldn't know hardly any of you in this room because she had introduced me to stuff. So in a lot of ways, I'm doing this today in honor of my friends Corlew and Mary Lou as well. But you can do whatever you're going to do.
So
we didn't talk about it. I didn't make any part.
The other thing I wanted to say is in respect to leadership, organizations don't exist without phenomenal leadership. Leadership matters. And in our church, we are fortunate to have a clerk of the church who is our leadership, who keeps us together, provides our organization and our passion and our, you bring our heart to the church as well. Dave brings our spiritual guidance. We're all in this together. So I'm excited about tonight. So Pam McCoy.
All right. So I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. And I am grateful to have, there's two books or two versions of the same book that were formally published. They're called Steadfast in Faith. One of them was published in 1974, and then there was an addendum to it in 1999 for another 25 years in there. Cynthia Wadsworth, whoever that is, helped to write those along with some folks from the church, and I'm really grateful for those, and an awful lot of tonight will be from those. And when I was kind of freaking out about getting this all pulled together, I went, well, I could just stand up there and read those books. And I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to read parts of them. And I don't know how many of you do public speaking or do presentations, but it's like freaking out. I don't know what I'm going to do, and I don't have this put together, and it was Wednesday night. And I'm like, just stop. The history of the church hasn't changed. It's in those books. Right? So an awful lot of what I'm going to go through tonight is just kind of supplementing information that is in those books. Of course, there is another 25 years after each of those. But we might get to, but some of the old stuff is funner. And then I've got a lot of pictures and some things that I think we're going to explore. So that's the nature. And feel free to interrupt with questions. I can't guarantee I've got answers, but I have half of the membership of the church is sitting in this room, so we'll do our best. The history of a church often reflects the history of the wider community. And certainly this is the case with the First Presbyterian Church in Georgetown, Colorado. There's a fun picture of the church, and of course everybody here knows the Harrison Roses. Oops. Hit that button for this and this button for that. So as it relates to the First Presbyterian Church of Georgetown, the founding of the church was in 1869. And this guy here, Sheldon Jackson, Reverend Sheldon Jackson, is responsible for the founding of the church. A little bit about him, and one of the resources I used, I actually, online now, you can find Sheldon Jackson's scrapbooks from most of his life and his travels. But he was part of the Presbyterian Board of Home Missions, which of course was the folks in the East Coast saying we need to get the Presbyterian faith out west into Colorado, Wyoming, and where all those people are going, because there's thousands of people going. We ought to be taking our faith there as well. So this is out of some of his scrapbook clippings. And in 1869, the territorial bounds of the new presbytery were those of the territories of Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, and Montana. And Sheldon Jackson was superintendent of missions, and he was directed to organize Presbyterian churches out here in the West. And so in 1869, he founded churches here in Georgetown, Idaho Springs, Colorado City, Pueblo, and in Golden City. And each one of their dates, February 27th, Pueblo was February 28th, Colorado City, March 4th was Georgetown, March 6th, Idaho Springs, and March 7th, Golden City. So in a number of other publications and things, you'll read some folklore about Sheldon Jackson riding into Georgetown in October of 1869 and founded the church. And I would say that really wasn't the case. That he had been around, and in his journals he had been around, but he met some people here. He met some people here. Oop, again, I'm going to do that. How many times am I going to do that in this presentation? So the founding members of the Presbyterian Church of Georgetown, there were 8. We only know 7 of the names. But it was Dr. Buchanan, Erskine McClellan, and Catherine McClellan, Mrs. Pollock, Mrs. Lizzie Todd, Mrs. Phillips, and Mrs. Eliza K. McCoy, which is just ironic what that happens. So I don't know about to you all, but I find it striking that of 8 founding members, 6 of those are women in 1869. And these predominantly would have been people that had been part of the Presbyterian faith before they came to Colorado as well. In terms of the pastor here was actually Reverend D.H. Mitchell. And in the early years before the church building was built, the worship was at the Congregational Church, also at the Methodist Church, sometimes at McClellan Hall. And then I even saw announcements where the church was going to be at the Fraternal Lodge up here. So in July of 1871, they were ready to start the idea of building a church. And McClellan bought a lot, it's that property, for $100 in July of 1871. And then, of course, let the fundraising and building begin, right? So in the newspaper records, in 1872, there's an article that the building committee of the Presbyterian Church has decided to make the new edifice at 28 by 56 feet, and yeah, it met the parameters that were provided at the time by the Presbyterians of the size and scale of what a church should be. And that they had secured, besides the lot, funds of $2,500. It was the intention, if the way be clear, to make the structure of brick. The survey of the lot has just been completed and work on the foundation will be commenced forthwith. And then in September of 1872, we got mentioned that the congregation have commenced the erection of a large church in the borough near the south branch of Clear Creek, where Taos Street crosses the creek. The location is a good one, as our town is rapidly increasing that direction. We noticed the other day that the foundation is up and nearly ready for the framework. And then later, then it's actually a year later, the roof of the Presbyterian church will soon be in place. This building, which is of stone, built in the most substantial style, will, when completed, be an ornament to the city. We trust it will be ready for occupancy at an early day. So, Georgetown is really lovely to, and blessed, honestly, to have some fantastic photographs from this particular point in time. In 1873, there's a William Henry Jackson photo. A lot of you have seen this. It's from Leavenworth into Georgetown. And this one is July of 1873 down there. This particular photo, when you drill way in, and the resolution is amazing on his photos. There we are, right? See it? So the school's not there yet, over here, right? School would be here. But there it is, waiting for its roof. It's just the coolest picture ever, I think. They're on Taos Street. And then some of us don't think that well in black and white, so here's another concept of what that might be if you visualize better in color. And this is Sean that has gone through and digitally colored an awful lot of those William Henry Jackson photos. So just kind of a fun perspective of the bell tower there. Church no roof looks kind of weird, but kind of cool. But it was true, right? So the dedication of the church didn't take place until a whole nother year. It was in September of 1874, September 20th. And people from the Presbyterian in Denver came up, and the church was full. I don't know, I can't find that real picture over there, but I would love to have the actual of that photo. Of course, it was overflowing. The church is very handsomely finished inside, being seated with comfortable and neat walnut pews. The plaster and stucco with ornamental moldings, the work of McCoy, cannot be excelled in the territory, and is highly creditable to his skill as workman and to his artistic taste. Our friends of the Presbyterian Church now have a house of worship, which they have just reason to be proud. And we trust that they will become a prosperous and remain a harmonious body of working Christians. Oh, kind of a fun little statement. In a different article, the church, its facade was highlighted with an imposing stone bell tower, topped with eight finials and a solid balustrade, which reflected the design of the Gothic windows. A handsome rose window for the east end of the church was donated by Mr. and Mrs. Henry Seaford. The church represented then, as it does now, the finest in small church architecture. So shortly after keep on this one. There's another photo here. Well, it was from the Denver Public Library archives, and a number of you have probably seen this picture of Georgetown as well. In this one, of course, here's the school. there's the church. Over here, the mill. And this photo was labeled 1900 to 1917, but in digging deeper into this photo, drilling in there on the church, I assure you that this was not 1917. Because if you look at this photo of the church, the spires aren't on. So this would have been before 1874. The windows are in, all right? So when I look at historic pictures of Georgetown, guess where I'm looking? I'm looking at for the school to figure out where that is. I'm looking for the church, and then I'm looking at things on the church to kind of understand context. But that definitely is not a 1900 picture. This is sort of in that era. A big part of the church, there was a society of a ladies' aid society, and the Society of Little Workers, or also a society of willing workers, were formed. And they were really important, and were really important across the whole life of the church into the 1960s. The Society of Little Workers, just for information, was a group of girls between 5 and 12 years old, and they sold their handicrafts to make money for the church and for things around the church. And then the Ladies' Aid Society, or the Ladies' Philanthropic Society, all the way literally until 1969, were a lot of the activities and ice cream socials and events and things, a lot of which went to help the church. But they were able to sell their handicrafts to purchase a small chapel that was attached to the rear of the church, not too long after it got started. So here's a picture, another William Henry Jackson picture, this time from the other side of town, all right? 1890. We are here, so the church has been there for a while. And again, me digging into I gotta get myself centered, and then I gotta go look, right? So on this one, of course, school is over here. Here's the church. Here, the Presbyterian church is here. Right there, you can see the rose window. For those that are unfamiliar with the term, a rose window simply means a round window. It's not about what's in the pane, it's the shape of the window itself. I had to learn that myself. And then here's that little chapel that they were talking about for the little workers and such. Now this here was a Methodist church in town. Now on this, and I have a little arrow to point to that. That's what I just said. This particular photo, so all I did was take that same photo and I went down the street a little ways. There's the church up there, Methodist church here. Go down Taos, right? Over here would have been the park. Right here, the reason why I zoom in here is that building right there is the manse. It's the clearest historical photo I know of holding the manse image. So the Presbyterian Church in 1888 bought that property and the 4 lots with it. It's an incorrect description of where, but it was for parsonage purposes. So we bought it from Samuel Allen. He had the house built in 1882. And so the church has held that property all of these years. The manse was constructed as a private residence in 1882. Though intended by the church as a home for a resident pastor, economic downturn in Georgetown and church affairs necessitated use of the building as rental property. Indeed, in the lean years after the crash of 1893 through the first half of the 20th century, retirement from the lease of the manse appears to have been the major resource from which to pay ministers. The church remained a mission church until 1989. 1989. Served by visiting ministers and Presbyterian supply ministers who lived elsewhere. Available church records suggest that not until 1989, when Reverend Rob Craig became the first installed minister, did the church pastor actually inhabit this house. And that was for a rather brief period of time, and back to using it to pay pastor salary. I'm going to switch to 1892. My favorite picture of the church. Now I'm going to talk a little bit first. 1892, you think in Georgetown, 1892, life was prosperous for the town and the church throughout the 80s and into the 90s. The original members of the church remained active, principally the McCoys, who served for many years as an elder of the church and custodian of the records. The winter of 1892 dawns cold and windy. Imagine that. Cold and windy in Georgetown, go figure. On January 11th, McClellan was defrosting the pipes in his opera house when the building caught fire. It's the day that the opera house was demolished. And with it, by the way, was the early minutes and records of the Presbyterian Church of Georgetown. So the actual original records of the church are gone. But he did get together, and Charles Wells had kept a rather detailed diary of records, and they reconstructed as best they could the opening. It's part of why we don't know who that 8th member was, because they couldn't remember whoever it was his name. So this photo is 1892. It's that same year. But we have a beautiful copy of this picture in the back of the sanctuary too. Bob Primus had made for us, and it's one of my favorites whenever we have visitors or when you have people come in. I'm just showing this because at first glance it looks an awful lot like it does today. It looks like it could be a modern church until we start actually looking into it a little bit. And the keys appear, of course, mountainside, no trees. First clue on dating of a picture of Georgetown, right? When you have no trees, that's the 1890s when all the trees were being used to build things. Another thing here on this is the chimney from the coal stove. That was part of the church at that particular time. Of course, our guy down here. Presumably a minister, I don't know for sure, but obviously not a modern day picture.
That fence.
Up here, this is interesting to me, just as somebody looking at a church and a photo history, but look at the water damage on the tower already. Given that 150 years of records of the church are largely heating, water, sewer issues, foundation issues, I caught my eye like that already was, but it was 20 years old then. And then I hadn't noticed until I was doing this, but I saw something here, like caught my eye in that window. Because you can see the old cross things. So I zoomed in on that window and I realized it's fuzzy. But you can make it out, but it says First Presbyterian Church, and I don't know what's behind those leaves, but I do believe right here it says 1874 was in that front window in the stained glass. I just thought that was kind of fun, point out some random weird things that you wouldn't think of. And then in 1893, of course, was the repeal of the Sherman Silver Purchase Act, and a lot of things happening in Georgetown as the economy changed. I'll talk about that a little bit more. I did find another photo. This one said 1900. I know it's before 1917. It said Taos Street, but I know that this isn't Taos Street. But of course flooding, and having that church right there in that creek, because it does sit right on the creek, and you'll see that in some other photo. You can see how that would be a possibility. And this one it says, and this was I think from a dam break up by the loop, I believe. And it said this caused an overflow in a very short time. Half the creek was cutting across lots and rushing down Main and Griffith Streets towards the depot, so down there, right? Main Street was a broad stream of rapidly moving water until it reached 9th. Well, that's our neighborhood. When it cut across and joined the Griffith Street stream, flowing on to down to the depot and joining the main creek at the bridge below the depot. A stream was also running down Taos. So I just think it's kind of a fun picture. I mean, obviously a difficult thing, but it's just but that's the Catholic Church up there. So in 1917, we were treated to another one of those wide-angle photos from Leavenworth. And this one, of course, you've got the school here, right? You got the church. You got the Methodist church here. Catholic church up here. And then in this one, when we zoom in, I mean, there's nothing particularly remarkable about it. However, notice the boardwalks that have been in place in the town, the wooden boardwalks laid. But the Catholic Church burned in 1917, and in 1917 the Methodist Church was in real disrepair, and we actually repaid the favor, and the Methodist Church started worshiping with the Presbyterian Church when they couldn't use their own building. During the Depression era, Georgetown was hard hit by the Depression years, coinciding as they did with the final demise of all mining operations. The population slipped under 200. Jobs were scarce and money was scarcer. In November of 1932, the Bank of Georgetown failed, and the session of the church met to discuss discontinuing regular church services. They couldn't even afford coal for the stoves to warm the Sunday service. Largely through the efforts of, is it Emil Anderson? Bess Randall, and Amanda Ryland, it was decided that the church would remain open. The congregation was requested to bring a piece of coal as their offering. And at that time, Reverend Liggett rode the train to Georgetown from Denver to conduct the Sunday services. They were Sunday evenings, and he would ride the train up to provide a. And so he really helped. He offered to do that, and it really helped keep the church going. So that was one of those. Almost didn't make it past 1932. In the next several years, and really probably pretty much ever since, an awful lot of the things about the church has been remodeling and redecorating. Of course, hiring pastors and renovation types of things. As I have mentioned to a couple of you, looking into the heating problems, foundation problems, painting, and then throughout the forever search for pastors and for pastor leadership. This photo here is in 1939, and in relation to some of that, especially that 1892 photo that we looked at, this one, a couple things. We have electricity because here's a light coming in, and the light, by the way, the light used to be on the corner of that bell tower, right here, alright? This one you can see several of the windows are boarded over because the paint had fallen or had broken. And then my fancy little window here, sign is gone, and there's some kind of plaque there, and I did try to zoom into it, and it's of course not the resolution to do so, but you definitely can see it says Presbyterian Church on it. In 1940 there was a new roof, so this is that same era, 1939, 1940 here. But it does, I mean, if you look, you can see it looking a little bit rough in areas. The next slide is fun. This is sort of about music, and throughout the papers of the 1800s and all, and then even now, music and performance has been part of the church. This is the first, or the earliest inside picture that I've got that's valuable to see. Of course, the rose window mentioned. This is the choir. There would have been a door here to go out to that chapel in the back. This woman right here, there's Anna, right there, next to the hymn board. This one is hanging in the church, and I do happen to have the names of these people if anybody's interested to look at it from the back of the photo. 1951 photo from down the creek a little bit. It's just such a stunning building, always has been. Let's see. So in the 1950s, some of the first remodeling is they went up, taking down that chapel rather than continuing to try to figure out heating and everything in there. I believe what Coralie had told me, that building never had flooring, that always was wood floor, or dirt floors in that particular building. But this is kind of fun to see it back behind the church. This one you can see on the church, you can see the damage, the wall damage on that corner because the creek is right there as well. This would be more from Taos Street. So you would have, I guess you could have walked down. This is where the walkway is these days. You could go down through the trees, or you could go through the church to get out there to it. And then this is again that stream, and just how close it is to the church. The next one I have, thank you, Robin, for being here, for sending me this. There was the 1965. So with this was one of the major renovations of the church. And this included the pews were split. Originally the pews had been in the middle. The pews were split for a center aisle. I understand what that was a specific request, Robin, for your sister's wedding. And they obliged. There was gold carpet, and very curiously, a choir loft above the altar.
Wow.
So this is the new choir loft up there. And then there were partitions placed at the back of the sanctuary. In 1962, they had built a new wall on the creek. And then just for some perspective of things that are happening at that time, the historic district designation was 1966, so that's kind of this era as well. In 1971, oh, actually, in 1965, there also was another flood. So thanks, Robin, for this one too. But we had the new wall, but it still wasn't quite enough to get some perspective. And there's part of that old boardwalk, like, part of those boards are still there, I think. I know they are across the street at the school. 1971, the church got a bell. Church got a bell for that tower in 1971. It was a gift. It's a 400-pound bronze bell. Don't really have a picture of it, and Greg, I didn't send you back up there to take a picture of that bell for me. I know you've been up there several times, and I've never taken it. But I did see this one in a preservation booklet which was being done, and so you can kind of see the bell up there. I will tell you an inside story as it relates to that bell. I believe that Otto and Buff installed it, and I was told that the flywheel on which that bell rides is an old flywheel from Loveland Ski Area. And with Otto and Buff, I don't doubt it. There was some additional exterior things happening, and this is 1973 of the church. Lois, we're getting in your area here. So again, everybody takes a picture of the creek, and then by the way, the entrance to they had built started building the activities room, and this was what that entrance looked like. And then Mary Lou forever harped about getting stone facing on that facade, and I understand that Brent Kruger did it for free. Bless his heart. And the gardens, of course she started the gardens. 1974, the centennial celebration, there were all kinds of activities all throughout the year, including shows and things. In this particular handout, Ron Morse spoke on the ghost towns of Colorado, and the entertainment was Mary Lou Rucker, Bill Geiger, Rosemary and Loretta on that, a local talent program as part of it. Let's see. Where are we? 45 minutes. Okay, we'll go fast now. So also in 1974 is when we got the windows that are now in the back of the church. Those stained glass, those were all gifts as part of that celebration, and some of them in honor of Pastor McIntosh at the time. The Steadfast in Faith booklet was published in 1974, so that was the first one. And then in 1976, the church actually received a James Grafton Rogers Award for preservation from ACI. Because preservation obviously had been part of the theme of this church well before the other things.
Pam, do you know who made the windows?
Oh, I've got it in some records of where we bought them.
Pam,
Mm-hmm.
I have one more
Yeah.
big event for 1974. Brent and I were married in that church in 1974. Right from McIntyre.
And then, I didn't know where to put this one, but I put it where I have the windows. By the way, here's a close-up of that rose window. And just because it's a fascinating picture, when they did put the activities room on the back, you can see how the roof, the height of that room, it was going to be 2-story, and they made it a 1-story. But they butted it just as close as they possibly could to the bottom of that rose window. There is a screen over it here, and actually I think Rob told me that there's actually a board up across there too. There's rumor, I hear, some people might tell people on a home tour, But that little hole right there might be a bullet hole, and I'll tell you, it's not a bullet hole. In that window, but the window is original to the church, and that was apparently from boys throwing rocks incident that happened back there, and it might have been by Robin's brothers. In 1982, by the way, is when community Easter sunrise services started, the tradition of that. The church really has been, there's been a lot of different activities in these years since then, as far as, used to be a voting precinct, the senior luncheons used to be held there, in the activity room at the church. There was Friday school for kids, then there was Friday school for adults. The manse for a while was an adult spiritual awakening center on the downstairs, while the upstairs was living quarters. It's just been part of the town, and there's just been events and things, and it's been open to the community for a variety of things. Found a fascinating receipt in some of the records from 1992. It was Viacom asking, or they were paying us to film the church. And it was an episode of Perry Mason, 1992, which wasn't all that interesting. However, I did see, and several of us this week have watched Perry Mason. But this is a picture of when in the back of the church, when those walls were high, those partitions were high, they were 6 feet tall back there, and so I snagged the screenshot because I thought that looked interesting, and then later I could see in the minutes where they wanted to take those down because it originally had been for noise and things, but it was blocking, like for memorial services, you couldn't see from back there, and some of us know from some recent memorial services that you really need to have that space for people to be able to see, because they stand all over right there. In 1996, we had a historic study, preservation study done for the manse. In 1999 to 2000, there was extensive refurbishing of the inside of the building, again, of the sanctuary. In 1999, the steadfast book was updated, and then in 2000, by the way, is when Historic Landmark District came to be, and of course the church is a contributing structure, as is the manse for that. 2002, preservation study for the church. In 2005, secured a significant Colorado Historical grant for the big structural situations with the church. This picture's 2001. You can see the new windows are in there and such. As far as those last years, I mean, I don't really have a whole lot to say other than we've done a lot of things. There's been community choir and cantatas at the church. In 2020 and 2021, we actually did virtual worship. So we worship on Zoom. And with that, I can say that as far as anybody knows, this church has never had a Sunday ever without worship service, which is not something that you hear too often. And I know that first one we did on Zoom during the pandemic, Mary Lou was furious because it was the first time we'd ever not had worship in that church. And then let's see, here's more pictures of the garden, the lamp out there. And one of those other things I had said it had been a beacon. We've kind of referred from time to time to that lamp in the garden as being a beacon. And then last year in March, we had that big blizzard, right? And the highway was closed, and all the interstates were closed, and then the town shelter was full. And I had the pleasure, honestly, of opening the church to be an overflow emergency shelter for 19 people and a dog, including one that came in an ambulance. I mean, it was a big deal. But this is about 7 o'clock in the morning the next day of what that looked like. And I had posted this on Facebook just afterwards, and a friend of mine from high school who now lives in Canada, ironically, her comment on my photo was, I bet people, when they saw that light, saw that church as a beacon for you. And I thought that was really cool. Over those last several years, it wouldn't be right of me to not mention the important people that have been part of the church. Bob and Betty Hall, certainly the Andersons, Bob Ashton, Sandra Downs up here, the Primuses, Bob McCoy Primus, Sandy and John Jackson, the Whirlins were really big in the church, Krugers, Rutherfords, Patty Jo Tharp, the Fraleys, Stan and Ann Moore, and as far as music, certainly Carolyn Beard, Kathy Layton, Norma, Pauline Marshall has been a big part of the music in the church as well. And Rob Solomon of later. So anyways, conclusion. Georgetown and the First Presbyterian Church are survivors. The town has lasted longer than most other mining communities that existed during Georgetown's mining days. And this church alone, amongst the town's original churches, has maintained a continuous life. Each, the town and the church, offers in its own way a sense of community. These feelings of civic pride and spiritual communion, built upon the foundations of dedication, sacrifice, service, and goodwill, have served both institutions well in the past, and no doubt will continue to do so for years to come. So with that, here's just some other photos from last year. There's what sunrise service in the park looks like. So everyone, you guys are in now, eh?
It's cold.
Christmas.
Jolly in the band.
Christmas, and then that actually is from quarterly service in November. Anyways, that's what I pulled together. Hope you find it. It did look like we've, here's our little list of pastors we've had. And it looks to me like we've had, looks to me like we've had 40 different pastors over the 150 years, but then there's temporary pastors, and there are a lot of years of supply or of visiting ministers. Well, we're grateful to have you with us now, Dave. Any questions?
That top picture reminds me of a couple of years ago when they did the blessing of the animals. Remember that?
Yeah.
Everybody brought their dogs.
Or mules.
Mule.
The mule that ran away and pulled Gary down in the lunch area. Oh my gosh. I did find some really funny other things out there in the papers, but I didn't, I chose not to do it. But an interesting read certainly is some of the travels and some of the work there of Sheldon Jackson way back in the day when he was establishing all of those churches, and then certainly the ones in New Mexico. It's a harrowing accident up on Grace Peak, where a wagon went off the side, and he was there. Nobody died, but and the horses didn't die either. But it's pretty. It was 1871. It's called Accident on Grace Peak.
What did Sheldon Jackson actually do?
Well, he was out establishing churches, so finding people in communities, generally Presbyterians, that were willing to form actual churches. And he helped found the churches actually there in Denver. He had a house and he had an office in Denver when he was the superintendent of missions. And then after that, just a second, I'll be right with you. But the other things that he did, I mean, a fascinating character. But he also was responsible for bringing reindeer to Alaska from Siberia, and is responsible for the domestication of reindeer in the United States and in this part of
I just
the
wanted to add to that.
Americas.
There's a Sheldon Jackson Museum in Sitka, which is part of Alaska, and he was not really well liked up there, or not greeted well with the Inuits. They really didn't like him that well.
Yeah.
There's a museum up there, and
I mean, he honestly really helped I guess, take over the native land of Alaska and make it, and have it become a part of the United States.
interesting.
He was also a real collector of artifacts and of pottery, and he was very respectful of all of those artifacts. And there's a couple of different colleges that have large exhibitions out of his collections. And even when he was here in Colorado and when he did his New Mexico stuff, a lot of things are sketches and then collections of pottery and pieces, and down at Mesa Verde and some of those areas. It was a real fascinating dude, I think, in the technical terms, the churchy terms.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.